The death of Emmett Till fueled the civil rights movement and changed our world forever.
The courage of Mamie Till, Emmett's mother, transformed our nation's history.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here is your host and moderator.
Welcome, viewers. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Andrea Luxton. I am the president of Andrews University and today's moderators. And I would like you to meet our four panelists.
Hi, I'm Tom Plumbley. I'm a minister in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, serving at First Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas.
My name is Rabbi Dan Levin. I serve as senior rabbi at Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
Hi, I'm Carl Trovall. I'm professor of ethics and history at Concordia University in Austin, Texas.
Hi, my name is Tony Matthews, and I'm the senior pastor at North Garland Baptist Fellowship in Garland, Texas.
Thank you all very much. We have a challenging topic today, and I want to warn you at the beginning that there is some sensitive content, and the content may be disturbing or offensive to some individuals. It is also a very important topic, we believe, for us to cover.
I said, Mr. Rayner, do you have a hammer? He said, what do you mean? He said, yes, I have a hammer. I said, I mean, if you can't open the box, I can. And I'm going in the box. All right. He said, Miss Bradley, if you're that determined, I want you to go home and relax. He said, I'll go in the box and I will call you when I take the body out of the box. And when I was satisfied with that. I had to see, though, what was in there. And when I got back to, when he called me and I came back to the funeral home, about 3 blocks away, an odor met me that nearly knocked me out. I said, what on earth in the world is that? It was Emmett's body. That's how the smell was so strong until it covered a 2 or 3 block area. My father was on one side of me, and Rayfield Moody was on the other side of me, and Jean was at my back. And I shrugged them. I said, turn me loose. I've got a job to do, and I don't have time to be fainting now.
67 years ago this August, 14-year-old Emmett Lewis Till was murdered in a racist attack. Emmett was visiting relatives in Money, Mississippi, when he was accused of flirting with a local white woman at a family grocery store. Several days later, relatives of the woman abducted Emmett Till, brutally beat him and shot him in the head. His body was found tied to a cotton gin fan, fastened by barbed wire wrapped around the neck. Despite great pressure from local authorities, Emmett Till's mother insisted on transporting her son back to his Chicago home and demanded an open casket funeral. The graphic photos from his funeral were published in Jet magazine, and the reaction was explosive. The abusive photos of a 14-year-old boy literally shocked the entire nation. Most people do not realize the courageous decision of Emmett Till's mother actually provided the catalyst for the emerging civil rights movement. And so we are asking our panelists to consider the following questions. Firstly, imagine you have a young child and you see them pick up that Jet magazine. You see your child view those horrific pictures of Emmett Till. What would you say to your child? And then please imagine your child asks you this question. Why did this happen, Mama, Daddy? And why didn't anyone go to jail for hurting and killing Emmett Till? Would you tell your child that no one was ever punished and no one went to jail? How would you respond? And finally, how can we honor the profound courage of Emmett Till's mother today? We could name a street, we could put his innocent face or her face on a coin, or maybe we could love and respect all persons we meet. What do you think we should do? I'd like to return to our panelists who opened our conversation today to start this conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much. A very difficult subject for us to address today. A legacy of the racism that's existed in our country, and one of those horrific murders that stand out in our culture as a talisman, a sign, a little bit about our past, a lot about our past, and then the question about how we move forward. And I think, it did change our world significantly in our nation, but I probably should put a caveat a little bit on that, because violence still occurs to people through racist actions in our society today. And so I don't think that everything's been changed so that everything's fine now because of this horrific event. However, I think it's important for us to take a look at it today, and I'm glad we are. Imagine I have a young child. I have no idea I really don't know what I would say to my child. It would be honestly, I'd be speechless. I don't know what I would say. That said, I do think, though, that the power of the image is this, in that a lot of us hear of bad things happening, and you can read about it, and maybe even have descriptions of things, and it's bad as you read it. But when you have a visual picture of violence, or maybe a cell phone recording of something that's highly unjust that occurs, the minute you have an image of it, and particularly an image of a child, this, I think, grabs us deeply inside our hearts and our very being and makes us ask some deep questions. Listening to argumentation through words is one thing, but that kind of image has this kind of power. And this is why I think that this had such an effect on our culture, is precisely for that reason. One, that he was a child, but two, also that there was an image that went with it, that had a whole history behind it. And I'll stop there, because there's, of course, more to the story.
So I think that image of Emmett Till and the brutality that was visited upon him in his vicious murder is among other disturbing images of humanity's inhumanity that we have been forced to confront. So I remember as a young student when we were forced to watch the movie Night and Fog, which was the compilation of documentary evidence at the end of World War II and the Holocaust. I remember when I was asked to read Night by Elie Wiesel for the first time. And I remember when I was 15 sitting in a session with a survivor of the Holocaust who told the story of brutality that was inflicted upon him and on his family. Those experiences are deeply painful, and they sear into the consciousness, and that's good. I think one of the things that we do too often in our society is we want to shield ourselves, frankly, and our children from the brutality of what evil actually is and looks like. And when we do that, we diminish our opposition to evil. the reason why what Mamie Till did at her son's funeral, in the midst of, I can't even fathom the hideous grief she must have been feeling, was that she allowed her experience to show what evil looks like and allowed the world to see what evil looks like. And we talk about evil in an abstract way. We talk about racism and slavery and Jim Crow in these abstract ways. We talk about the deaths of 6 million people in the Holocaust in abstract ways. But when you look in the face of a boy that was brutally tortured and murdered, or you go to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial in Washington, D.C., and you peer over the wall at the sensitive images of people being murdered, children's bodies being carted off, then hopefully that will spur your conscience to action to do what's necessary to ensure that that kind of injustice is never repeated in our generation or future generations to come.
Thank you. Very powerful.
Yeah, thank you. I think we're talking about the power of art. In this case, the power of photography. I firmly believe there would have never been a conviction in the George Floyd murder case if it hadn't been for the video. And I firmly believe that the civil rights movement would not have happened when it did, would have been stilted and very different if it had not been kicked off with this set of images that a mother, I wanted to say required, but certainly allowed to have, to be taken of her son. You know, we talk about, several weeks ago we had a program where we talked about how natural disasters happen all the time, and some of them reach up and grab us more than others. It's the same with crime. They happen all the time. Crimes happen all the time. Crimes based in race happen all the time. But sometimes some of them reach up and grab us. And so yes, I think these are amazing questions that you asked, Madam Moderator, about asking us to imagine ourselves with our child or our grandchild, looking at pictures of Emmett Till in his casket, or George Floyd being killed by the police officer, or other such images. Those are not to be run away from. We've got to grasp those as opportunities to talk about what racism looks like, and the question of, do you talk then about, well, why do you answer the question of why didn't anybody get convicted? Well, you know, then you got to talk about structural racism. You talk about how racism exists within the society, within the structures of our culture. That there were not even churches that were asking that question, those questions of their congregations and of the world at the time of Emmett Till's death. We have to talk. We have to face the bad stuff, lest we rear a generation that is ignorant and uninformed and making decisions based out of that ignorance.
Thank you.
Yeah, painful. Even today, just hearing the moderator's statement, and with the information I know about the Emmett Till murder, I can see the photograph right now in my mind. Mixed emotions. It's just beyond me how 67 years ago in that whole, context, how cruel people could be. And he was visiting Mississippi from Chicago, not even his home. And I read some reports where he was buying 2 cents worth of bubble gum, and haven't verified it, but I guess they say the lady later on said that it wasn't even true. And to just drag someone out of a home and to beat a 14-year-old to death, it's just painful. It's painful. And to know that the jury, just acquitted the people. It's awful. Speaking to children, and we've always had to talk with our kids about the challenges in society, racism. You got to be careful when you're pulled over by the police. Yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Show your hands. It makes no difference what kind of education you have, what status in society. When you are pulled over by a police officer, no talk back. And see, so we've talked to our kids in our communities about these things. Unfortunately, we have racists are warts on the rear end of society, boils on the backside of humanity. And we have got to do something to rid or to contain these races. I think the open casket opened our eyes. It opened dialogue. I think it was much more than an open casket. It opened hearts to our own racial biases. And it opened a conversation that we're having 70 years later, almost 70 years later. So it's painful to hear, painful to read, and this is why I'm bent on bringing us together as races and as we all are, and trying to get an understanding so that we can live peacefully with one another.
I still remember the thing that galvanized me when I was a child is looking at the whips and the dogs and the hoses being used on those who were peacefully protesting, right? In Birmingham, Selma, and that was just. I was forever changed by that as a child. I remember that, and it's like these images are really powerful.
Yeah, and
in moral education.
And I want to ask, all of us, when this happened, this is awful. And this is what we know. It's probably hundreds of thousands of cases that we don't know. And how do we deal with, because we've come a long ways and we want to be fair. I mean, society has come a long way. How do we deal with something like Emmett Till, and then we talk in our modern day time, 2022, about the advancements that we've made? And sometimes that's a tough conversation. How do you,
Let me tell you about a conversation that took place that I was a part of 30 years ago. It was a group of elders in our church. At that time, still a bunch of men, all white. But I will not forget how they were galvanized as one of the older men in the group told about the last lynching that had taken place in that town in Missouri, in southeast Missouri, and the way they were wrapped in the story that because he had witnessed it, and that began a dialogue within that congregation, within that group of leaders, and then within the larger congregation that was helpful.
And I think that when I think about people I know that have committed their lives to justice work or to doing healing work or other kinds of things, it was because they experienced these very, very difficult things in their formative years that propelled them to discover their mission. A friend of mine who's a pediatrician discovered his passion for medicine when his sister died of cancer when he was in high school. When people are either victims of or parties to or just impressioned by something that they see, that can open up their hearts for God to speak to them to say, all right, this is your path, this is your mission, this is the work that you can do to make a difference so that the world is closer to that vision that God has painted for all of us, for us to partner with God in achieving. And that's why I think when we try to, take library books out of libraries because they have difficult stories or they have difficult images or photographs like this, burying them or pulling them off the shelf or restricting them from view is a disservice to children. Letting people read and see difficult things allows their conscience and their moral core to develop.
Thank you. That's a great place to have a pause.
We hope you're enjoying today's program. If you'd like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the vision and history of the program, and we invite you to become a ministry partner, explore our Town Hall Estates healthcare facilities, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, we look forward to receiving your letters. You may write us at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. If you have a prayer request, please send it to prayerrequest@americanreligious.org. Thank you for writing and thank you for watching. Now, back to today's closing statements.
A difficult but very important conversation today, and thank you for coming back with us as we move towards the end of our show today. Our panelists are now going to give their closing comments.
Thank you. I'm a child of the Vietnam War era. Vietnam was just beginning to wear down, and when I graduated from high school. One of the most moving times in my life, however, was a visit to the Vietnam War Memorial, and to see that large piece of stone with all those names written on it, beginning with just one, and then more, and then more, and then more, and then going back down to just the last ones, impressed upon me the power of war to continue to be a part of my life. Similar experiences at Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, the Holocaust Memorial, just all the photos that you cannot tear yourself away from, that your tour guide is always pulling you to say, okay, we've been here long enough, and I'm wanting to say, no, I need another 2 or 3 hours to listen to these stories and to look at these photos and to look at the names. Art, photography is a part of our education, and we must continue to allow ourselves and our children to be moved by it.
I remember Guernica. That affected me in an incredible way. So, a couple of things. The first is, I think sometimes we get an impression that emotions like anger are somehow problematic and wrong. And I think that this show particularly raises that, questions that, because it isn't. In fact, I think if you see a picture like Emmett Till and you don't get angry, there's a moral problem there. You should be outraged. But I appreciate what you said, Tony, right before the break, which was that anger needs to be directed towards justice, not towards revenge. But I think we need to hold on to that anger, and we need to feel it, and we need to experience it, because that's a moral education all in itself.
Yes, absolutely. I'd like to just close with addressing the last question: how could we honor Emmett Till's mom? And I'll just read. This is a great piece in the question. We could love and respect all persons we meet. I think we can point to the good in all people.
In the Mishnah, there's the famous passage that says, when God created the universe, there were swarms of everything but just one human being. And why was that? Was to teach that to lose a single human life is as if you've lost an entire world. And I think that image of Emmett Till, that one individual human being, and God knows there were thousands upon thousands upon thousands who suffered fates like him. I mean, we used to have postcards of lynchings and people posing. But that idea that one human being transformed the consciousness of everyone that witnessed it. I'm reminded that once I was in the Warsaw Cemetery, and we were at one of the mass graves there where 200,000 people were laid to rest anonymously. And if you go to the rest of the cemetery, there are some monuments there that are literally 10 feet tall, alabaster, because it was a prominent cemetery before the war. And I remember the rabbi, Joshua Fass, who sat with the students that was there, he says, where are their grave markers? In Hebrew you call them matzevot. And he pointed at them, he says, you are their matzevot. Mm-hmm. How you live, the values you teach, what you will pass on to future generations, the work that you will do with your lives is the testimony, the memorial to those lives that were taken.
Viewers, thank you so much for joining us, and I do hope that you've been moved by today's program. Please remember we're here. Please send us your questions, your comments, your thoughts. The Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestant, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American rights to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And now, friends, until next week at the same time and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.